Hi everybody, welcome back to AI and Analytics, Shaping the Future, made possible by Alteryx. We're here with Tom Davenport, who needs no introduction. Tom, last time I saw you was this summer at the MIT CDO conference. Thanks for making some time for us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you bet. You know, we talked a little bit last time, and I know you've written about this. Sometimes I call it legacy AI, but that's still booming. And so how do you see sort of Gen AI, complementing, or even, competing, certainly competing for the mind share with traditional AI and analytics. But how do you see it complementing and going forward in terms of driving business value?
Yeah, it's a big issue. And, part of why I talk and write about this is I want people to call it something other than legacy AI or traditional AI or non-generative AI. The analytical AI is the term that I like best for that. More traditional machine learning where we're trying to predict numbers, not text or images. And I think it's at least as important as generative AI, despite all the publicity about generative AI. And in many cases, I think it's a bit more likely to make money for organizations because you use that type of AI in areas like pricing, in personalizing marketing content, figuring out who to target a particular ad to is an analytical AI activity. Fraud elimination in financial services, figuring out who to give a credit card to and not to give a credit card to. That's all analytical AI. So it's been around for a while, but it certainly has legs. And I think in many cases, we'll see combinations of analytical and generative AI in many use cases.
When I think about analytics and over the years, it obviously starts with the data, and we shove everything into a data warehouse. We build cubes that were fairly complicated, and you needed some really smart people to do that. And it was, the elapsed time to get to answers was quite significant. The science projects of Hadoop and the failed promises, frankly. And then, the cloud definitely compressed that time to value. But it's still generally those analytic systems historically, they're historical systems of truth. And with AI, it feels like we're just getting closer and closer to real time, connectors to back-end systems, where the business logic and a better understanding of the metadata and all those sort of technical barriers, they seem to be at least smoothing out or breaking away with AI. Do you have any perspective on that, and specifically the real-time nature of analytics and the industry's ability to compress the time to value?
Sure. Well, we've seen, of course, a lot of technological change in the generative AI space, but there's been a lot in the analytical AI space as well. We have automated machine learning now for about a decade or so, where people can create models with the help of in a way, a form of AI to do AI, and it will basically do all the steps in a machine learning analysis, except for, deciding what to do in the first place and figuring out what data set to use. And it'll try, 100 different algorithm types in a couple of minutes or so. So that really speeds things up. And I think even more importantly, maybe makes this whole domain accessible to people who, probably had a statistics course in college, but haven't done a lot with it since. So with some of these tools, you don't really need to know very much about the ins and outs of statistics, or, you don't have to write Python code to do the analysis. You just say, here's the data set I want, and here's the variable that I want to predict, and it's off to the races. So it's not only much faster, but makes it possible for a whole different group of people to do sophisticated analytical work.
You know, Tom, I was at this dinner last night, and it was a dinner for investors and startups, and a lot of young people there, as you can imagine. Smart, young, eager, kids in their 20s. And we were, you know, those of us who, like you and I, who dye our hair gray, we were lamenting that we wished, you know, we were 25 again. And, you know, one of the folks said to me, well, you had the .com. And now you remember well, of course, you and I both, the .com. And back then, you know, the Negroponte, the bits versus atoms industries. And it feels like, you know, AI is, you know, maybe more ubiquitous. But what industries do you think are going to experience the biggest transformations and the biggest opportunities? Is it sort of across the board? Are there any patterns that you're seeing with this sort of an analytical AI that you're talking about?
Well, it's always been, as you suggested, based on the data that's available, and the industries that have the most data tend to be the ones who can make the most use of analytical AI. So financial services has been that way for a long time and was a pioneer in many domains about, deciding whether to extend credit and is a transaction fraudulent, that kind of thing. And of course, if you're talking about hedge funds or investment related AI, is predicting, which investment stocks or bonds or whatever are going to do well. That's always been an analytical AI activity. So financial services probably more than anybody, but retail has been very big in this regard. Lots of point of sale data that they can use to try to predict things and make sure we don't run out of stock on the shelves. Telecom has been quite big in this area. Everybody in that industry wants to predict and reduce churn, and it's very easy to create a churn model to identify the factors that are most likely to lead to churn. So I think the industries that have the most data tend to be the most successful. And it's not only an industry split, but big companies tend to have accumulated more data. Small to medium organizations are typically at a bit of a disadvantage in that regard because they just haven't had the scale or the time to accumulate a lot of data to analyze. And that's a difficult problem to solve. We don't really tend to have synthetic data on the analytical AI side. You have to actually accumulate it through your business transactions.
We mentioned retail, and I think about supply chain, and I'm far from a supply chain expert. You may have done some work in that area, but it seems to me that there's a lot of waste in the supply chain and a lot of opportunity to tighten that up and drop money to the bottom line, or just have better consumer experiences. How do you see analytics and AI playing in the supply chain and helping to address some of those challenges?
Well, I think, the trick with supply chain has always been, matching supply and demand. And demand planning is, I think, still in many cases, while it's becoming more analytical, certainly it's still a bit of an art. And you have to pull together lots of different types of data, everything from what you've sold at this time of the year in the past to what's the weather been like and what's the economy like and so on. So that's always been a domain where we have to combine a lot of data, and then we have to analyze it through various means. And once you have an idea of what the demand is, it makes it a whole lot easier to create the supply that will satisfy that demand and reduce waste, as you suggest.
Yeah, one of my guests told me that it takes 45 days to even address a supply chain imbalance or a disruption. So hopefully with anticipatory analytics, we can compress that. Let me ask you to put your practitioner hat on. I know you consult with a lot of organizations, enterprises that are trying to put data at their core and get competitive advantage. What are you hearing from them? What are the challenges that they face when trying to incorporate AI, analytical AI, generative AI, pull it all together? How are they funding it? and how are they operationalizing it and driving value and getting ROI, which many complain about not seeing the ROI.
Yeah, well, the big issue, whether it's generative or analytical AI, has always been how do we get to production deployments? It's easy to do a proof of concept or a pilot or a little experiment, but putting something into production means, you have to train the people who are going to be using the system. You have to integrate it with your existing technology architecture. You have to change the business process into which it fits. And it's getting, I think, better with analytical AI. There were a lot of studies early on suggesting that in that domain, uh, 87% of machine learning models, never got implemented, something along those lines. I don't know how good the data collection was, but there was certainly a problem. And in generative AI, we see the same issue that a lot of organizations are experimenting, but they haven't made a full commitment to embedding it into their customer service process or whatever content generation process they want to use it for. So I think the key is to, from the beginning, say, okay, we need to, assuming it's successful in its tests and experiments, we need to put this into production and to plan for that from the very beginning, budget for it. It costs a good bit more to put something into production deployment than it does to experiment with it, sometimes 100 times as much, depending on the complexity of the system. So, but we need to think about that in advance.
I saw a survey recently. I hope I'm right. I think it was an IBM survey, or I'm pretty sure it was. But they were asking folks what the value proposition was, or their expectation for AI ROI, and the number one response by far was revenue generation, and then second was productivity, which surprised me. I would have thought by far it would be the reverse, that really doing more with less, maybe either reducing headcount or keeping headcount flat and getting better productivity would have been the number one response. Now, I guess if you're raising revenue, that gives you better productivity. But what are you seeing in terms of, are you seeing companies really trying to drive revenue? And it would seem with analytical AI, give the retail example, that actually would make sense. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think if that's your objective, then analytical AI is probably going to get you there more easily than generative AI, because you can, as I was suggesting, you can target the right customers, you can figure out what's the best price to charge, all those sorts of things. I think generative AI has been more oriented to productivity kinds of improvements, but most organizations haven't seriously measured the productivity gains. In order to do that, you'd probably have to do some kind of controlled experiment where some of the people in your organizations don't have generative AI and some do, and you compare the speed with which they create content and the quality of that content. Never easy to measure quality. Most organizations haven't really done much in the way of looking at serious productivity analyses from generative AI. So maybe that's the reason it came in second. Revenue gains are easier to measure, and I do think in many cases they'll involve analytical AI.
And probably easier to justify to the CFO. Are there any specific use cases that have caught your attention? Yeah, people talking about deep fakes, obviously security and privacy. Are there any that stand out that are noteworthy that analytical AI can support or advance?
Sure, there are lots and lots of them. We've been doing analytical AI for so much longer than generative AI, so the use cases have kind of piled up. I'm very interested in healthcare and the role of AI in healthcare, and all of the advances that we've seen in healthcare AI. Many of them have just been in research laboratories, not yet at the clinical bedside, but predicting who's going to get diabetes, analyzing what treatment strategies are most likely to pay off, figuring out whether that X-ray or CAT scan or whatever image you have shows a cancerous lesion. Those are all analytical AI use cases. If you're looking at an industry like financial services, anything that you do to predict who's a good customer and who isn't, which investments are likely to pay off. Almost every industry I can think of, if you were talking industrial businesses, as you suggested, it's supply and demand in many cases. Predictive maintenance of your equipment is an analytical AI application. So there are literally thousands of possible use cases that you could support with analytical AI.
Well, I'm excited about your healthcare. I just got my perpetual 14% increase in our organization's healthcare. I wish I could raise prices 14% every year, but I don't think my customers would go for that. I'd be in big trouble. So maybe analytical AI can help solve that problem. I have to ask you, it's the buzzword of the day, agentic. I mean, we started writing about it a while ago and we were very excited about it. Now it's a lot of agent washing, but how do you see agentic evolving? I think people are very optimistic, but there's a lot of work that has to be done, particularly around the data estate. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, I'm very excited about it as well. And I was really, before I was an analytics and AI guy, I was a process guy. And I do think that agentic AI is going to have a major impact on how we carry out most of the business processes in our organization. And you'll have workflows being orchestrated at the top level and calling on various agents throughout that process to do this task or that task. I think in many cases, people identify agents with generative AI, and that will certainly be important. If you have to analyze a document or translate an email or something like that, it's really good at those types of activities. But I think many agents will also be analytical AI in nature to make a decision of some type or another. Again, if you're trying to do something with marketing and you want to decide who's the best customer to send this ad to, you'll need analytical AI for that. And then generative AI might actually customize the ad to that individual customer's attributes. So I think it's going to be a very exciting period. I'm hoping that there's still an important role for humans. I was talking to a vendor yesterday who has a kind of a built-in escalation capability to get to a human. Clearly, we wouldn't be interested in agentic AI if we didn't think that it could do something in the realm of productivity improvement. But we humans will need to play a role as well. And I think checking on the agents, making sure that the transaction has happened that we want to happen, looking for any hallucinations from the generative AI agents, because I think those are going to still be an issue, will be things that humans can still do.
I think your point about process and workflows is right on. I think that's not going to be the hardest part to put into the system, but it's going to be critical once you get your data in order. You're pretty good. In fact, that's one of your superpowers is naming things. I think systems of engagement was yours. So analytical AI, we can now retire legacy AI and non-gen AI. So thank you for that. But I want to ask you, as those worlds come together, the gen AI and the analytical AI, are there ethical considerations or privacy considerations that organizations should be more aware of as Gen AI systems and analytical AI systems come together?
Well, there have always been privacy issues with analytical AI and predictive models where we're using AI to make important decisions. We had issues about redlining in mortgages where whole neighborhoods were eliminated from bank mortgages for their housing because not everybody in their neighborhood, but a few households were having a tough time paying back their mortgages. The good thing about analytical AI is that you can get much more granular about how you treat your customers and your suppliers and so on. It just gets you down to a very detailed level in your predictions. Some people are uncomfortable about all the data that's used for that. I've done a lot of work recently in the personalization space, and people want their ads and their offers to be personalized, but they don't want to give up the data in order to do it. So we're a little schizophrenic about that particular issue as consumers. The issues with generative AI, privacy, tend to be different, more intellectual property related issues in many cases, and we don't want the prompts that we put into a model to be used for training. But I think the privacy issues historically have been a little more challenging with analytical AI than with generative.
Hey, last question. What are you working on these days? What's exciting you? What's up for 2025 for Tom Davenport?
Well, I am doing some work on Agentic, like everybody else, I guess. I've just finished the manuscript of a new book that's about, I think it's going to be called The New Science of Customer Relationships, delivering on the one-to-one promise. And you were talking about you and I being in this industry for a while. You may remember the whole idea of one-to-one marketing and how we were all supposed to get things that were highly personalized to our needs and desires. And I don't know about you, but I don't get those very often. So we kind of in this book talk about what really derailed it and what AI can do, both generative and analytical AI, to really realize that promise that we've been expecting for such a long time.
Yeah, we make a lot of promises in this industry because we're so excited and we drive a lot of value, but we got to keep moving forward. Tom Davenport, thanks so much. Always great to have you on theCUBE.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. And thank you for watching AI and Analytics, Shaping the Future Made Possible by Alteryx. I'm Dave Vellante. Keep it right there. We'll see you next time.